Hey everyone, tonight we're drifting back to a time before kings, before crowns, before anyone thought wearing heavy metal on their head was a personality trait. So go ahead, get cozy, maybe shift the pillow once or twice until it decides to participate in your comfort. Take a slow breath, because tonight we're gently wandering into the Stone Age, a place where absolutely none of us, myself included, would last even 24 hours without crying, or at least attempting to negotiate with a mammoth. And the mammoth, who has absolutely no interest in our problems, would keep walking. So let's ease back, way, way back, before written history, before agriculture, before coffee, which, let's be honest, already disqualifies most of us from survival. This is a soft, slow journey through what life was really like in the Stone Age, or at least as real as we can get without someone inventing time travel, which they absolutely should do. But apparently, it's complicated and against several laws of physics, naturally. So let's drift in. The morning routine you wouldn't survive. Let's imagine the sun rising a soft, prehistoric glow. No alarm clocks. Just the general understanding that if you didn't wake up, something with teeth might wake you up on your behalf. In the Stone Age, mornings began early, not because people were motivated, but because daylight was literally the only productivity tool available. If you missed it, that was it. And candles, torches, household lighting, not really an option unless you enjoy your home occasionally bursting into flames, which admittedly, many early huts did. So people rose with the sun, stretched out on beds made of grass, fur, and the occasional poke stick, and began what we'll generously refer to as a daily routine. First came the hunger, a deep existential sort of hunger, the kind that said, if you don't go find food, you may become food, which is a powerful motivator and also a terrible way to start your day. You, in the modern world, might stumble toward your fridge. A Stone Age person stumbled outdoors to see what edible object wasn't already running away. Breakfast options included berries, assuming a bird hadn't beaten you to them, nuts, provided you were willing to fight a squirrel. Last night's leftover mammoth, if you were lucky enough to have mammoth leftovers. Most people were not. And if you're imagining a leisurely meal, maybe with a little morning music, no, the soundtrack of the Stone Age was mostly wind, insects, and someone in the group dropping something important and blaming spirits. Your first misstep, clothing. Let's talk about clothes. Or, more accurately, the very soft suggestion of clothes. Stone Age clothing was practical. By practical, I mean it technically prevented frostbite and public scandal, but it wasn't comfortable, and it definitely wasn't sized correctly. You didn't go to a store, you didn't try things on, you didn't check for a return policy, because the return policy was, catch another animal and try again, champ. If you imagine yourself in a cozy fur cloak, looking all rugged and Instagram ready, no, it shed, it smelled, it was possibly still annoyed at being turned into clothing. People wore furs, hides, and fibers fashioned with bone needles and sinew thread, which sounds neat, until you remember that sinew is essentially prehistoric sewing string created from animal tendon, very sustainable, very biodegradable, very stretchy in the worst possible ways. Not fashion, just survival. Now, think about the shoes. Stone Age shoes were basically flattened bits of hide tied around your feet with strips of other hide. Not exactly cushioned, not ideal arch support, but excellent for developing a constant awareness of every pebble on earth. Modern people complain about stepping on a Lego. Stone Age people stepped on everything, all the time, forever. The commute, it was mostly avoiding predators. We like to picture prehistoric landscapes as peaceful, natural spaces, open meadows, soft rivers, gentle breezes. Yes, those existed, right next to the things that wanted to eat you. Your commute, whether it was to go hunt, gather, make tools, or sit around deciding whether the sky was angry with you, was just a long walk with an ever-present alertness that any bush might suddenly contain claws. I'm not saying people lived in constant terror. I'm just saying they lived with a firm understanding that nature's customer service department did not accept complaints. Let's picture you walking with a small group. Everyone is quiet, not for stealth, but because talking wasted energy, and energy was needed for running, or carrying, or just continuing to exist. You would immediately annoy your Stone Age companions by asking questions like, are we almost there? What's the plan today? Did anyone bring snacks? And they would look at you with the prehistoric equivalent of, please stop talking. You'd scare the food away. Hunting, or as you'd call it, a terrible idea, here's where you would absolutely fail. Stone Age hunting required stamina, strength, patience, teamwork, an ability to throw a spear farther than 2 meters, the capacity to be okay with blood, mud, sweat, and occasionally disappointment. Hunting was not glamorous. It was long, exhausting, and often unsuccessful. Groups would track an animal for miles, sometimes days. Meanwhile, you would be thinking about lunch around hour 2. Let's say you help your group track a deer. You walk, and walk, and walk, and then someone whispers, "There, you don't see anything." Of course you don't, because you were born into a world where your eyes spend 8 hours a day staring at glowing rectangles. Stone Age eyesight, that was Ultra HD, nature's 4K. Eventually, after much sneaking, creeping, and wishing your feet didn't hurt, someone would throw a spear, and you would duck, instinctively, which would, understandably, ruin the moment. If the group was successful, congratulations, you get meat. If the group failed, also congratulations. You get a learning experience and a handful of berries you found on the way back. Either way, you're starving. Gathering, the peaceful activity, that still would break you. Perhaps you're thinking, well, I wouldn't hunt, I'd gather. That sounds pleasant. It does, until you remember that not all berries are kind. Some are poisonous, some are sour, some look identical to their edible cousins, except for a subtle shade difference that no normal person can identify. Gatherers did not have plant apps. No one could snap a picture and wait 3 seconds for a cheerful botany tool to say, "That is extremely toxic. Please do not eat." You learned by experience, or watching someone else have a very bad afternoon. Gathering required knowledge of seasons, terrain, animal habits, and every plant in your region. You, meanwhile, can barely identify herbs in your own kitchen. Lunch, if you're lucky, assuming some success in the morning, the group might stop for a meal. This was not a picnic. There was no blanket, no basket, just food, eaten quickly, before something else decided it wanted the food more. You might chew on dried meat, roots, maybe a handful of berries. There were no spices. Salt was a treasure, not a condiment. Flavors were mostly smoky, earthy, chewy. In a concerning way, it filled your stomach though, and that was enough. And if you complained, your companions would simply hand you more roots until you understood silence. Tool-making, or the art of hitting rocks, until something happens. This is the part of the day where you would absolutely quit. Stone Age tools were amazing feats of engineering for their time, but to make them you needed skill, precision, and the ability to mentally commit 2 hours of banging rocks together without losing your patience. Imagine sitting on the ground, selecting a specific rock, selecting another specific rock, and then hitting the first rock with the second rock until a sharp edge formed. Simple? Not at all. Hit too hard, the rock shatters. Hit too softly, nothing happens. Hit it wrong, your fingers look like sacrifices to the tool-making gods. Meanwhile, the veteran toolmaker sitting next to you is shaping perfect blades with the ease of someone who has done this every day since childhood. You make gravel, and that's fine. Everyone has to start somewhere. But your usefulness is now officially categorized as spiritually enthusiastic, materially unhelpful. Weather, nature's daily reminder that you're not in charge. Let's talk about the weather. Because Stone Age weather did not care about your plans. Rain, it poured. Clothes, soaked. Shelter, leaked. Fire, gone. Cold, it wasn't grab a hoodie cold. It was sleep next to everyone in your group, or freeze cold. Heat, it was please don't pass out while chasing that antelope heat. Wind, just say wind plus a poorly placed hut, was a lesson no one wanted to repeat. And yet, people adapted. Because adaptation was the only choice. You, meanwhile, would be looking for the thermostat. The evening, no Netflix. Just survival after a long day of hunting, gathering, tool-making, and avoiding extinction. The group returned to camp. Evenings were peaceful in their own way. People repaired tools, prepared food, told stories often about animals, ancestors, spirits, or the times someone heroically fell into a river. There was laughter, but it was quiet laughter. Energy was precious. Fire crackled, smoke drifted, people rested, and you would be ready for bed at 6:30 p.m., emotionally defeated by a world that did not include blankets, microwaves, or chairs that support good posture. Sleeping arrangements you wouldn't love. Stone Age beds were piles of grass and fur arranged on the floor. Were they soft? Not exactly. Were they warm? Mostly. Were they stylish? Not unless you enjoy interiors designed by necessity and wildlife. People slept close together, partly for warmth, partly for protection, partly because the concept of personal space had not yet been invented. You would attempt to roll over and find yourself immediately elbowing someone who absolutely does not appreciate it. Outside the hut, nighttime sounds continued. Owls, wolves, the occasional rustle that you would interpret as imminent doom, but was probably just a very uncoordinated rabbit. And as you drift off, if you managed to drift off, you'd realize something important. Stone Age life required constant effort, constant awareness, constant cooperation. You could not get through a day alone. And that, maybe, is its strangest contrast to our modern lives. People survived because they lived together, worked together, and relied on each other for everything. Even if someone snored, which they definitely did. Hey, everyone, let's drift a little further forward in time now. Past the Stone Age, past the first farmers, past the era when people discovered cheese by accident and wisely decided not to ask questions. We're moving into the glittering, gilded, deeply uncomfortable world of royalty. So if you're tucked in, breathe a little deeper, loosen your jaw, unfurl your shoulders, because this next part, it's about royal marriages and how they went wrong. Genetically wrong, spectacularly wrong in the ways only centuries of inbreeding, political panic, and questionable matchmaking can achieve. Let's drift over to a few dynasties who really should have read a biology textbook, or at least stopped marrying their cousins. The Habsburgs, the dynasty that treated genetics like a suggestion. We begin, gently, with the Habsburgs, a family so devoted to marrying each other that they essentially committed to speedrunning the limits of heredity. The Habsburgs believed very earnestly that if they kept their bloodline pure, it would keep their empire stable, which it did not. But what it did keep pure was a very distinctive facial structure. Let's talk about the famous Habsburg jaw. It was legendary, partly because it was enormous, and partly because it kept appearing, generation after generation, like a hereditary surprise guest that no one had the courage to uninvite. Portraits of these royals looked like the artists tried their best, but also quietly wondered if they were being pranked. Charles II of Spain is the final, shining example of the whole genetic experiment. He was nicknamed El Hechizado, the Bewitched, which sounds poetic until you realize it was just a polite way of saying, this poor man has every medical problem imaginable. He struggled to chew, struggled to speak, and struggled to produce an heir, which, given the family tree, was maybe a blessing for Europe. His autopsy later revealed he had the body of a 70-year-old at age 39, which is impressive in the saddest possible way. People blamed sorcery, curses, evil spirits, when really, the culprit was a long line of marriages between individuals who shared more DNA than one should ideally share with their spouse. But the dynasty kept repeating the pattern, because of course they did. The Ptolemies, when marrying your sister was just Tuesday. Now let's drift to ancient Egypt, specifically, the Ptolemaic dynasty, a family that looked at the phrase "keep the bloodline pure" and said, why stop at cousins? Let's really commit. The Ptolemies openly married their siblings, not discreetly, not reluctantly, very publicly, very enthusiastically, husband, sister, wife, brother, repeating for centuries like a family tradition no one was brave enough to question. Their logic was simple. Egyptian pharaohs were divine, so their blood needed to stay divine. Unfortunately, divine blood behaves a lot like regular blood, and regular blood becomes problematic when repeatedly shuffled around the same genetic pool. By the time we reach Cleopatra's, that Cleopatra the dynasty is struggling. Health issues, fertility problems, mental instability, sudden deaths, the usual symptoms of a family tree that looks like a circle. Cleopatra herself, though brilliant, charming, and politically savvy, was likely genetically fragile in ways her public image didn't reveal. Most of her siblings conveniently died. Some were poisoned, some were executed, some succumbed to illnesses that suspiciously resembled genetic disorders. It's unclear whether the Ptolemies understood what they were doing to themselves, but given the results, probably not. Medieval European royals, cousins everywhere. Let's drift gently across Europe now. The Middle Ages, a time when people believed bathing too often was suspicious, but marrying your cousin was considered patriotic. Royal houses married relatives constantly, not because they loved each other, although occasionally they did, but because alliances mattered more than genetics. Your cousin might be annoying, but your cousin's kingdom, very useful. The problem was that after a few generations, everyone was everyone's cousin. If you were a duke, princess, or king, you were basically playing a genetic card game with a very limited deck. So kingdoms ended up with rulers who were sickly, fragile, sterile, depressed, prone to strange ailments, and occasionally dramatically unprepared for the whole king part of being king. One infamous example is the poor Charles VI of France, who suffered from severe psychological disorders. He believed he was made of glass. He refused to let people touch him, and he sometimes forgot he was the king. His condition likely had genetic roots. After generations of cousin marriage produced a royal family with more inherited problems than political solutions. His nickname, Charles the Mad, not subtle, medieval people, not subtle at all. Mary, Queen of Scots, and Darnley, a genetic disaster and a bad decision. Now, let's drift to Scotland. Because the drama always increases once kilts enter the equation. Mary, Queen of Scots, married Henry Stuart, known as Lord Darnley. This union was ill-advised. Genetically speaking, they were first cousins. Politically speaking, they were a volatility experiment. Personally speaking, they disliked each other almost immediately. Darnley was handsome, tall, charming, and extremely impressed with himself. He was also violent, jealous, erratic, and a bit of a disaster in noble clothing. Mary, despite her grace and education, made the classic royal mistake of assuming marriage would improve him. It did not. Their genetic compatibility wasn't much better. Their son, James VI and I, inherited a range of health problems, stiff joints, chronic illnesses, and a lifelong fear of witches. To be fair, the witches part wasn't genetic. That was just Scotland at the time. But he was physically frail, highly susceptible to illness, and generally resembled a man whose DNA had been through several poorly planned generations. And this was after only a few cousin-level marriages. Nothing extreme, just enough to cause problems. The Bourbons, beautiful portraits, less beautiful genetics. Now let's float down toward France again, to the Bourbon dynasty. The Bourbons were known for elegance, extravagance, and an admirable ability to bankrupt a nation with parties. What they were not known for was good genetic planning. Take Louis XIV's descendants. Many of them died young, not from tragic accidents, but from the kind of hereditary conditions that happen when your marriage options are limited to your cousin from Spain, your cousin from Austria, your cousin from somewhere else in Europe who looks identical to the other cousins. Louis XIV himself fathered many children, legitimate and otherwise, but most of his legitimate heirs died early. Those who survived were often sickly. By the time Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were running France into the ground, the genetic situation had not improved. Louis XVI had health problems and fertility challenges. Marie Antoinette, contrary to drama-filled rumor, was not the problem. Louis simply had a condition that made intimacy difficult until surgery corrected it, which must have been a delightful experience for everyone involved. Their children again were fragile, ill, and heartbreakingly short-lived, symptoms of a bloodline stretched too thin by concentrated genetics. English royalty. It's fine. We're all cousins here. To wrap up this section, let's glide gently over to England. Britain's royals frequently married their relatives across Europe, because Europe's noble families were essentially one big extended group chat. Queen Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert. They had 9 children, and all 9 carried the royal haemophilia gene across Europe like a well-intentioned but deeply unfortunate party favor. Victoria's son Leopold suffered severely from the condition. Several grandsons and great-grandsons died young, and the gene helped destabilize multiple European monarchies, most famously Russia, where Alexei Romanov inherited haemophilia, contributing to political upheaval and the family's tragic end. All because a few royals thought cousin marriage was harmless. Spoiler, it wasn't. Closing this section softly, so that's where we'll rest this chapter. Royal marriages glittering on the outside, catastrophically ill-advised on the genetic inside. Intrigue, politics, alliances, and entire bloodlines quietly unraveling from the inside out. It's almost comforting, in a strange way, to know that even the most powerful people in history still made truly terrible decisions, repeatedly and with confidence. Hey everyone, if you're still awake, or even drifting pleasantly in that half-dream place, we're moving into a new chapter tonight, one that is quietly ridiculous, one that proves absolute power does not, in fact, improve anyone's personality. We're settling into the soft, flickering candlelight of royal courts across history, and visiting the kings and queens who behaved with the emotional maturity of a melted pastry, petty, dysfunctional, occasionally dangerous, but mostly just exhausting to be around. Take a nice slow breath. Let the tension ease out of your shoulders, because we're moving into the royal equivalent of a group therapy session, except no one here is willing to admit they're the problem. Let's drift in. Charles the Bald. He wasn't bald, and that's only the beginning. We start with a gentle medieval mystery. Charles the Bald, a man whose nickname suggests a shiny dome, but who actually had hair, plenty of it. No one is quite sure why he was called the Bald. Possibilities include irony, sarcasm, medieval people being inexplicably rude, or the fact that he lacked land at birth. Not hair. This was a man who spent his life arguing with his brothers over territory. They carved up Charlemagne's great empire like it was a slightly stale loaf of bread, grabbed chunks of it, and then complained they didn't like the flavor. Charles himself fought, negotiated, sulked, and occasionally prayed very loudly for victory. He was a capable ruler, but the family drama never stopped. A kingdom built on pettiness. It set the tone for medieval Europe quite nicely. King John of England, medieval customer service nightmare. Now we drift over to England again. To King John. You might know him as the villain from Robin Hood stories, or the king whose barons handed him the Magna Carta while muttering, "We're not mad, just disappointed." John was petty on a near-professional level. Some highlights: he lost most of his inherited lands in France. He taxed everyone to the point of rebellion. He imprisoned people for minor slights. He managed to get himself excommunicated. He had a talent for annoying literally everyone. He once starved a noble family to death in a castle because he didn't like them. He stole the property of widows who refused to marry men he selected. A real charmer. When he lost the crown jewels in a swamp, yes, genuinely lost them, people acted like it was the most personally predictable thing he'd ever done. King John was so dysfunctional that his reign accidentally improved English law. The barons finally said, "No more," and wrote it down formally. Sometimes progress arrives because someone behaves badly enough to inspire paperwork. Queen Isabella II of Spain, royal soap opera, but with corsets. Next we float to 19th century Spain, where Queen Isabella II reigned with the energy of someone flipping through suitors, the way modern people scroll through streaming platforms. Her arranged marriage to her cousin Francisco was not a success. Francisco preferred silk stockings, lace collars, and the company of young male courtiers. Isabella preferred affection, excitement, and several different men who were not her husband. Royal observers politely pointed out that Isabella's children resembled various officers and diplomats who visited the palace. Isabella responded by not caring whatsoever. Spain, meanwhile, endured a political hurricane, revolts, coup attempts, governments rising and falling like tired penguins on ice. Isabella herself had charm, fire, and absolutely no interest in subtlety. Eventually she was exiled. But in Paris she thrived, laughing loudly, wearing bright dresses, and thoroughly enjoying life away from the judgment of her political enemies. Petty a bit, dysfunctional, certainly, entertaining, always. Peter the Great, the Tsar who cut beards and friendships alike. Let's drift north to Russia. To Peter the Great, a man so enthusiastic about modernization that he stormed into traditional culture like a well-intentioned tornado. His reforms were impressive, his methods less so. Peter was obsessed with Western Europe, so much so that he commanded nobles to shave their beards. A personal grooming preference enforced by law is never a good sign. Those who refused had to pay a beard tax. They received a small medallion proving they had paid for the privilege of facial hair. Yes, Russian nobles carried beard receipts. Peter also forced men to adopt Western clothing, forced women to attend social gatherings, and forced everyone to pretend they were enjoying it. He once stabbed a mutinous soldier himself, several times, just to prove a point. He executed his own son after suspecting him of treason. A family dispute escalated beyond reason. He was brilliant, terrifying, and deeply exhausting to live under. Louis XI, the Spider King, who trusted no one, including himself, softly drifting into France again. This time to Louis XI, nicknamed the Spider King, which is rarely a good omen. Louis, she didn't trust anyone. Not his nobles, not his family, not his servants, probably not his reflection. He maintained networks of informants. He spied on everyone. He hired astrologers. He carried holy medals like protective charms. He wore simple clothes to hide his rank, which made nobles quietly furious. He manipulated alliances like a bored chess player and punished enemies with creative enthusiasm. He had iron cages built specifically to hold political rivals. These were small cages, uncomfortable and unpleasant in the long term. Louis XI viewed kindness the way some people view suspicious leftovers, skeptically, and with the assumption it would betray him. He was effective, though his reign strengthened France, mostly out of fear, but still strengthened. Queen Ranavalona, Eye of Madagascar, the monarchy of maximum anxiety. Let's drift over to Madagascar, where Queen Ranavalona, Eye ruled in the 19th century with a level of suspicion that could have powered a medium-sized city. She believed foreign influence was dangerous. She also believed many of her subjects were plotting against her, and she believed the best way to handle both problems was through extremely assertive policies that made everyone afraid to sneeze in her general direction. Under her reign, foreign missionaries were expelled, innovations were rejected, grueling traditional rituals were enforced, punishments were severe. Paranoia was practically the national mood. She was intelligent, determined, and utterly relentless. Her son later reversed her policies, and the island opened again to the outside world. But Ranavalona's rule is remembered as one long, anxious, iron-fisted chapter. Henry VIII. Relationship problems with national consequences. We can't visit dysfunctional royalty without stopping for a very soft, drowsy moment with Henry VIII. 6 wives, 2 beheaded, 1 died after childbirth, 1 annulled because Henry changed his mind, another divorced because Henry changed his mind again, and finally one who outlived him by simply being smarter than everyone else. Henry was charming in his youth, athletic, musical, educated. Then he became Henry. He bankrupted his treasury, destroyed monasteries, created his own church, and executed so many people that England, quite understandably, sighed in relief when he finally calmed down. His later portraits show a bloated, irritable man who looked like he might yell at a dinner roll for existing. Petty, yes. Dysfunctional, decidedly. Avoidable, absolutely not. England got the full Henry experience. Christian VII of Denmark, a king who needed a break and never got one, drifting gently to Scandinavia now. Christian VII was king of Denmark in the late 1700s. He was smart, sensitive, and severely mentally ill. He suffered from anxiety, hallucinations, emotional instability, and compulsive behaviors. His court did not know how to help him. Instead, they judged him, whispered about him, and occasionally manipulated him. His young queen, Caroline Matilda, eventually fell into a relationship with his physician, which caused a scandal big enough to push Denmark into political chaos. Christian himself spent his life struggling, misunderstood, and pressured by a crown he was not equipped to wear. Petty, no. Dysfunctional, only because the system refused to meet him with compassion. But his reign shows how fragile monarchy could be when placed on the wrong shoulders. Illegublis, Rome's gift to chaos, and now, a soft drift back to Rome, where Emperor Illegublis ruled with the theatrical flair of someone who had never once encountered the concept of moderation. He was crowned at 14, never ideal, and he immediately replaced Jupiter with his own new son. God forced senators to participate in bizarre rituals, married multiple times, including to a Vestal virgin, held dinner parties where guests sat on air-filled cushions that deflated, released lions and bears during banquets, as a treat frequently dressed in elaborate gowns, and declared he wanted a uterus installed surgically. Most of Rome reacted by blinking slowly and wondering if this was a test. Eventually his grandmother arranged his assassination, because even Roman political patience had limits. Ending this section gently, so there they are. Kings and queens with tempers, egos, anxieties, bad decisions, worse decisions, and habits that would get most people uninvited from all future social gatherings. As you breathe slowly, let the thought settle that history's elites were not elegant marble statues. They were humans, flawed, petty, tired, overwhelmed humans, sometimes funny, sometimes frightening, always interesting, and rarely, if ever, will adjust. Let's drift a little further into the Stone Age now, past the morning cold, past the questionable breakfast, and into something even more exhausting: other people. Because if there's one thing that hasn't changed in tens of thousands of years, it's that humans are, well, humans, complicated, petty, often unhelpful, and always just a little too loud when you're trying to relax. In your little band of Stone Age companions, maybe 20 to 50 people if you're really lucky, you quickly learn that survival depends on cooperation. But cooperation depends on patience, and patience is not something most of your prehistoric friends were exactly known for. So let's settle in and wander through the soft early evening world of Stone Age social life, where every conversation is both essential for survival and deeply irritating. The village meeting that solves absolutely nothing. Imagine it's late afternoon. The air is warm, the smoke from the fire is drifting lazily, and you'd really like a nap. Naturally, this is the moment the group decides to hold what we generously call a strategic discussion. Everyone sits in a circle. Everyone has important opinions. The topic today, something critical, like, should we move the camp 10 feet to the left? And the meeting goes exactly how meetings have always gone in human history. One person is absolutely convinced they are correct. Another person repeats what you just said, but louder. So now it's apparently their idea. Someone else is chewing loudly, because multitasking is a timeless skill. A fourth person hasn't spoken for an hour, but is visibly furious about something. And someone in the back is sharpening a stick in a way that seems metaphorical. You contribute a comment like, maybe we could stay here. It's been fine, and immediately regret it, because now everyone is talking at once, and not in the helpful way. More in the fire has consumed the last shreds of diplomacy way. Eventually, after an hour of entirely unnecessary dialogue, the group decides to do exactly what they were already doing. Because of course they do. Humans haven't changed. Not one bit. Minor disagreements with major consequences. The Stone Age was essentially one long team-building exercise, and like most team-building exercises, it could go wrong very quickly. Let's take food, for instance. Imagine you and another forager both reach for the same berry bush. A totally normal situation. Except that in the Stone Age, this is basically a geopolitical crisis. Someone's grandmother declares it must be shared. Someone's uncle insists that his grandmother said otherwise in the old days. A cousin says berries are lucky and shouldn't be picked at all. Meanwhile, you're standing there wondering why you didn't just stay in the cave and gnaw roots like a reasonable person. Eventually, the crisis is resolved with a complex diplomatic agreement involving equal berry distribution, and maybe a small argument about who ate their berries too quickly. This is what passes for politics in your world. Not exactly the grand palace intrigue of later centuries, but functionally, it's all the same dromagest with fewer crowns and more sticks. Your reputation, a fragile, silly thing. Reputation mattered deeply in a tiny prehistoric group. And unfortunately, your reputation is built on things like, did you trip over a log yesterday? Did you fail to catch a rabbit that one time? Did you misunderstand a gesture from the elder, and now everyone thinks you insulted the chief's grandmother? Tiny mistakes become legendary stories, not epic, heroic stories. More like, remember when you tried to make a spear and it broke instantly? Ah yes, truly a defining moment. Nothing is forgotten. Because there is nothing else to do in the evenings, except remember that time you embarrassingly slipped into a stream while everyone was watching. Your friends mean well. They love you. They support you. They also bring up that stream incident every single night around the fire. Hierarchies that no one claims to have. Most Stone Age groups operated on what anthropologists like to call egalitarian structures, which is a nice way of saying there is absolutely a hierarchy. But everyone pretends there isn't. There's always the person who's not the leader, but definitely tells everyone what to do. The elder who never makes decisions, except for every important decision. The hunter who isn't in charge, yet somehow controls the food distribution. And the quiet one who says nothing but judges everything. You're told everyone is equal. And yet, somehow, all the tasks you don't want end up being yours. Strange how that happens. Even stranger how everyone insists it's totally random. Gossip, humanity's first and favorite sport now. Gossip in the Stone Age is not like gossip today. There are no tabloids, no social media, just a circle of people quietly muttering over the evening fire. But the content, exactly the same as ever. Oh, did you hear that so-and-so fell asleep during guard duty? I saw him drop his spear and pretend it was intentional. She said she wasn't hungry, but then ate her portion and half of mine. The chief's son can't start a fire to save his life. But don't tell him I said that. Every whispered story travels through the group like wind through dry grass. Fast, inevitable. mildly inconvenient. And if you think you're above gossip, well, you're not, because everyone is always gossiping about you, too. Even the mammoths probably talked romance, with extra steps, and then there's Stone Age romance. This is not the sweeping, candlelit drama of later kings and queens. This is to people making prolonged eye contact from across a cluster of rocks, hoping no one notices, because privacy was not invented yet. Dating rituals included sharing food without being asked, sitting next to someone at the fire without being mocked, not throwing a pebble at them during an argument, helping them carry things without sighing too loudly. The bar is low, but the stakes are high. And because your group is tiny, every romantic interest is also potentially your cousin, your rival for berries, your friend's ex from last migration season, or the person who still brings up the stream incident. Love is complicated, and your options are limited, deeply limited. Let's drift softly forward. Let's settle a little deeper now, into the cool quiet of the prehistoric evening. The sun is dipping low, the shadows are long, and everything in your environment is preparing for nighttime in the same way you are, hoping nothing unpleasant wanders over. Surviving in the Stone Age isn't really about bravery or strength or exceptional skill. It's mostly about not doing anything catastrophically stupid. And unfortunately, humans are humans. So that goes about as well as you'd expect. Lesson 1. Fire is both your best friend and your worst enemy. If you lived in the late Stone Age, congratulations. Someone before you had already discovered fire. Probably by accident. Probably while trying to hit a rock with another rock out of sheer frustration. Fire is warm, comforting, hypnotic, a little glowing miracle in a world full of cold, hostile scenery. However, fire is also the single easiest way to ruin your entire week. You are told repeatedly, don't get too close. Don't wave your arms over it. Don't put anything in it unless you want it permanently gone. And please, for everyone's sake, stop poking it with sticks just to see what happens. Stone Age humans don't have a formal rule book, but if they did, it would just be one page that says, don't burn the camp down again. And still, someone always manages to lean their fur cloak a little too far forward, or drop an ember into something flammable, or accidentally set a decorative stick on fire because they thought it would look interesting. You learn quickly that fire is not something you control, it merely tolerates your presence. Lesson 2. Everything is sharp and all wants to bite you in the Stone Age. Footwear is optional. This is unfortunate, because the ground is not. Every stick hides a thorn. Every rock hides a smaller, sharper rock. Every plant hides a bug that resents your existence. You step carefully, gently, almost meditatively, and still, you end up with a splinter the size of a javelin, a mysterious rash, something that may or may not be a bite, and a strong desire to lie down until the pain goes away. And then there are the animals. Most of the creatures you encounter fall into 3 categories. Things that want to eat you, things that don't want to eat you but absolutely want you gone, small creatures that technically shouldn't be threatening, but somehow are. The Stone Age rabbit, for example, is adorable, but it can outsmart you, repeatedly, and with no remorse. You try to catch one for dinner, and it just stares at you, then hops away with the energy of someone who knows you haven't had protein in days. Lesson 3. Weather is not your friend in modern life. Bad weather is an inconvenience. In the Stone Age, bad weather is an autobiography. Every cloud is a threat. Every cold breeze is a preview of personal tragedy. If it rains, you're soaked. If it snowed, you're frozen. If it's windy, everything you own is suddenly airborne. There are no coats with waterproof lining, no heated blankets, no snug insulated boots. Just animal skins, wishful thinking, and the hope that whoever was supposed to fix the windbreak didn't fall asleep again. And while you huddle by the fire, trying to dry out what remains of your dignity, someone inevitably remarks that it wasn't this bad last season, a sentence humans have apparently been saying since the dawn of time. Lesson 4. Food is more theory than reality. Hunting is hard. Gathering is unpredictable. Fishing is well fishing. Some days are good. You find berries or roots, or a deer wanders too close and makes the tactical mistake of being delicious. Other days, you are chewing something that tastes like sadness and tree bark because someone told you it was edible enough. Meals are small. Flavors are questionable. Nutrition is whatever doesn't kill you. And if you have leftovers, which you won't, you don't store them. Because prehistoric refrigerators are known today as the ground, and that's where scavengers live. Food is a momentary experience, a fleeting joy, a temporary relief before the next round of hunger sets in like a disappointed parent. Lesson 5. Sleep happens whenever, wherever. In the Stone Age, bedtime is flexible. If you're tired, you sleep. If something is chasing you, you don't. Simple. Your sleeping arrangements are a patch of ground, a slightly softer patch of ground, or someone's fur cloak that you definitely weren't supposed to use, but you did anyway. Nighttime brings deep quiet, broken occasionally by animal sounds, insects, someone snoring directly into your soul, the feeling that a lizard is crawling on you. Even if nothing is there, actual lizards crawling on you, but it's calm, gentle, almost peaceful. You sleep lightly, you dream strangely, and you wake the moment someone steps on your foot in the dark. Lesson 6. Injury is basically a lifestyle. Scrapes, cuts, bruises, sprains, these are daily companions. You are a walking museum of minor injuries. None of them heal quickly. Some don't heal at all. And everyone gives advice you didn't ask for. Mash this plant and rub it on your leg. Sit by the fire until it stops hurting. Ignore it, and it will probably go away. My uncle once had that and died, but you'll be fine. Medicine is creative. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it makes things worse in fascinating ways. But you keep going, because everyone else does. There is no alternative. If you're alive enough to stand, you're alive enough to forage. A simple philosophy, terribly applied. Lesson 7. You are, against all odds, still here. And yet, somehow, despite the weather, the predators, the hunger, the questionable decisions made by your entire social group, you're alive, you're tired, you're scratched up, you smell like you invented the concept of earthy, but you're still breathing, still walking, still part of the tiny human story unfolding one slow day at a time. So let's drift deeper, because the Stone Age has more to show us.